Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited to have another 2024 NBA mock draft here on the channel. I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. This is the best time of the year. We've got NBA free agency coming up, NBA offseason coming up. We've got a lot of great things to cover here on the channel. So I hope you guys are enjoying all of the content. I'm working extremely hard during my playoff coverage of the Minnesota Timberwolves while working my normal job and making sure to post daily uploads, even some days with double uploads for you guys. So if you do enjoy all the hard work, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. Make sure you're subbed to the channel. I'm sure a lot of you already are, but most of you might not be too. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. It would really help me out a ton. And let's jump into that mock draft here. Now I want you guys to go into the description quick too, join our Discord, link is in there. It's a great place to talk hoops. You would love to be a part of it. I'd love to see you in there. And first overall, here we are now. The Atlanta Hawks are on the clock. And in most of my mock drafts, I have talked about the Atlanta Hawks taking Alex Sarr first overall. But in this mock draft, we are going to shake things up a little bit because I think there is a real possibility we could see this occur on draft night. Quinn Snyder and the Atlanta Hawks brass, Landry Fields, were in attendance in France watching Zaccharie Risacher in a few of his most recent games, and he's been really balling. So first overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting forward Zaccharie Risacher from JL Borg, playing for JL Borg in the LNB Pro A League. And he's had some tremendous performances over the last couple of weeks, including a 28-point showing where he caught absolute fire from behind the arc. And I think one thing with Atlanta, who already has Clint Capella under contract, one of the league's best offensive rebounders, you also already have Onyeka Okongwu. Maybe I'm overlooking the possibility of them just retaining their centers. And instead of drafting Alex Sarr to be the long-term franchise center, maybe they look for a franchise-defining wing, someone who can be a key part of their organization moving forward. Because when you look at their wing position, AJ Griffin really didn't play very much for the Hawks this year under Quinn Snyder. You also look at DeAndre Hunter, who is constantly injured, missing a lot of time, and honestly, with his contract, I don't think is looked at as a huge long-term positive around the league. You also look at someone like Bogdan Bogdanovic, who's already in his 30s. They don't really have a franchise-defining wing, whereas Capella and Okongwu, you could sell yourself on being a quality center combination for the foreseeable future. So maybe Atlanta, instead of taking a big man, 7'1" Alex Sarr, they go with the 6'10" Zaccharie Risacher. And I know people are going to have the criticism of him that he's not a primary shot creator, not someone you put the ball in the hands of to go and really generate offense for a team. And I know that's going to be a criticism of his. But one thing I will say, that doesn't really matter a ton, especially when you have Trae Young already on the roster. Part of why the DeJounte Murray fit in Atlanta hasn't worked is because of the playability of Trae Young off the ball. He just hasn't really grown as an off-the-ball player too much. So maybe instead of trying to find players who can create their own shot and be offensive engines around Trae Young, maybe you need that real clear role definition of players who can play off the catch. I think if you look at the Dallas Mavericks this postseason, one of the reasons why they're finding so much success, Kyrie Irving has been very shot ready and play ready off of the catch, playing off of Luka Doncic and attacking gaps, taking open shots. And I think for Atlanta here, if you can find a 6'10" wing who can do that, play off of the catch, be a marksman from behind the arc. He shot over 39% from three this season in the LNB Pro A League. So he's playing professional basketball, shooting it very, very well there with a really great frame, a lot of length and height to his game, obviously, as well. Just from a wing perspective, he's huge. So there's obvious athletic benefits. He can attack closeouts pretty well. Again, he's not going to hit a tween step back three probably, but what he is going to do is rip through, get to the rim and finish, or catch and shoot open threes. Maybe he can add a step back into his game. We'll see what happens. But there's a lot already to like about Risacher. He's already dabbled with a few different skill moves when it comes to his handle and his shot making. So maybe there's some upside that he can grow into there. But even if he doesn't grow into that upside offensively, you know that you're still getting a guy who can fit around other star talent. You already have that in Trae Young if you're Atlanta. And then you can also get a guy who can be a franchise-defining defensive piece who can guard the perimeter extremely well, has at times this year guarded 1 through 4 for JL Borg. I think that's going to be one of the most important traits he brings to Atlanta is his defense, plus his length, size, versatility, and readiness to play off the catch offensively. So I actually do think this is a pretty good selection for the Hawks first overall, even though it's different than what I've been typically mocking up to this point. Moving on to pick number 2, we have the Washington Wizards, and I'm extremely excited for the future of the Washington Wizards. I want to highlight Michael Winger and Will Dawkins. I think that they are doing a fantastic job. I think they're already in the upper echelon of smartest front office pairings in the league. You look at teams like Boston, some of the smartest teams in the NBA, Sam Presti, Oklahoma City. They find success by kind of reinventing themselves on the fly, and that's something Washington had to do a lot of last year, trading away Bradley Beal, trading away Kristaps Porzingis, finding ways to really reinvigorate the roster. They were able to pull off a Chris Paul trade with the Golden State Warriors. They've brought in a ton of assets, and now they're also reaping the benefits of the decision to tank. They're finally in the top 2 of the draft once again. They really need a lot of lottery luck over the next couple of years to really see this rebuild completely through, but they get a little bit of it here in their first draft after the decision to trade away a lot of their core pieces. Obviously, they already drafted Bilal Coulibaly last year in the lottery. They've done a good job, I think, up to this point. Now it's about adding more talent, and they get to here with Alex Sarr. This is their franchise center moving forward. The Wizards traded away Daniel Gafford, who has been tremendous for the Mavericks this postseason and since the trade deadline. But now they get a huge upside swing, a guy who can be way better than Daniel Gafford, a guy who can be really an instrumental piece in forming an elite defense with a lot of versatility, scheme shiftability, and I think he's going to be really portable to the NBA with his offensive and defensive game because of some of the things he's capable of doing. At times this year for Perth, he was out on the perimeter, switched onto guards, and not only does he switch onto guards and force them to work, but he can make them change direction multiple times, and with them, he has the hip fluidity, the mobility, and the recoverability as a shot blocker to stay attached to guards and to contest guards' shots at the rim with some really impressive moments this year for the Wildcats. I was super impressed with Sarr from the beginning to the end of the season, mostly defensively. And then offensively, there's a lot to work with. I think he could grow into becoming a fantastic short roll decision maker because he already has some semblance of a pull-up jump shot, so he's a threat coming off at the free throw line or so as a shooter. And then off of that, with his overall versatility and fluidity with the ball in his hands, there's hope that maybe he can turn some of those short rolls into extended drives to the rim, getting to the cup and finishing above defenders with his great length and size. I believe a 9'4" standing reach. So he's a massive human being who's super athletic, jumps extremely well for his size. And I think outside of just those physical raw traits, he has a lot in his bag offensively to already work with. He's comfortable handling the basketball, at times brought the ball up the floor this year. So I think overall for Washington, getting this type of player in Alex Sarr who can be a transformational defensive chess piece. If you want to blitz, if you want to hedge, if you want to drop, he can do a lot of different things. He's not going to be elite at all of them on day one, but I think he's going to be serviceable in all of them early. And if you get the right coaching around him and you really focus the right areas of development for him, the sky's the limit for this kid. I think he could become a multi-time All-Star if everything goes right. So I think Alex Sarr could be a tremendous player. I think Washington gets a real cornerstone of their franchise here, second overall, and I'm extremely excited for them with this selection. Then we move on to the Houston Rockets, who have this pick, of course, from the Brooklyn Nets from the James Harden trade. And last week, I mocked Reed Sheppard to Houston, and while I do think fit-wise that does make a ton of sense, Rafael Stone has publicly stated that he is going to look for upside. He is not simply going into this draft for fit. And while Reed Sheppard may fit like a glove, there's other players in here who can still fit, but maybe have a little bit of a higher ceiling that Rafael Stone would want to bet on and put the chips in toward. So we're going to go with a different Kentucky guard. Third overall, I have the Houston Rockets selecting guard Rob Dillingham, who has a higher perceived ceiling than his college teammate Reed Sheppard. Dillingham, very, very quick with his handle. He's a phenomenal pull-up jump shooter. That's one of the most important things when you're evaluating players with upside is how can they score off of a live dribble? How can they make plays off of a live dribble? Rob Dillingham does it all. He can score off the bounce. He can play make off the bounce. He's a tremendous pick and roll decision maker. I like his game a lot from a sheer perspective of putting the ball in his hands, letting him create offense both for himself and for others. He's extremely gifted in that area, but one thing that makes him special compared to some of the other on-ball league guards in this class is he can really shoot it. He shot 44% from three this past year for Kentucky, and if you watch those games, there's a lot of tough, difficult shot making in there. It's not just, oh, he's got his 2 feet right, toes on the line, ready to catch and shoot. No, I'm talking about like off the dribble, like hand in his face off some of his catch and shoots, like deep range catch and shoots. He's got real range to him. He can shoot over people. Obviously, he's not huge. He's 6'1". He's smaller than I am. He's 6'1", 160 pounds. So he's not a big guy, but he's extremely talented. And defenses just don't seem to bother him as much as you would expect them to for his size. He found a ton of success at the college game. Even had a 4-point play this year on an incredibly deep three. So I really like Dillingham's game. Now, I know some Rockets fans are going to be very concerned about the defensive side of the ball, taking someone who's 6'1", 164 pounds. They're going to be worried about how how Ime Udoka can use that guy. But I do think that if there's a coach in the league to really build a great defense around a small guard, it is Ime Udoka. I think Ime Udoka is an absolute genius defensively. I think just looking at Houston this year, they didn't have like a real rim protector. Alperen Sengun's still growing defensively, and they had a small guard in Fred VanVleet. Obviously, VanVleet is a defensive-minded guard. He makes plays on the ball, but for them to have as good of a defense as they had without some of the elite defensive characteristics on their team that they were lacking, like true rim protection, like a bigger point guard, that's still very impressive to me. And he turned Jalen Green into a quality defender, so I think he could really maximize Rob Dillingham. This is a big-time upside swing here for the Rockets, where if they get the most out of Rob Dillingham, there's a real chance he could maybe blossom into the best player in this year's draft because of his sheer on-ball creation capabilities that I think he could bring to Houston and really transform that team with. Pick number 4, the San Antonio Spurs here now. Now, Spurs fans, I've been thinking a lot, and trading up in this year's draft I think does make a really good deal of sense because of some of the logistical impacts of staying at 4 and 8 and the likelihood of having to draft maybe a guard or 2 guards even, or maybe even being stuck with not getting great shooting, especially at pick number 8. So I do have the Spurs coming up in a future trade video that will be out the day after this one. I'm extremely excited for that video as well. But let's talk about the Spurs here, 4th overall. Now, I've been going with guard Nikola Topic here, playing for Red Star in the EuroLeague. And this kid has a lot of the physical traits and a lot of the feel that you're looking for in a franchise-defining point guard. You think about Luka Doncic and his ability as a pick-and-roll passer. What makes him so special? What makes him so dynamic? First of all, he's huge. And Nikola Topic, like Luka Doncic, has similar physical size. Now, this is not a comparison. I'm not saying Nikola Topic is the next Luka Doncic. Trust me, he isn't. And we'll get to that here in a second, why he's not. But one thing about Topic, like Doncic, he has a huge size advantage where he's going to not only be able to see over his man, but he's also able to see over the back line of defenders. He's going to be able to put the ball up over the top of the defense. He's not restricted to throwing only bounce passes like some other smaller guards are. So for San Antonio, if you're trying to maximize Victor Wembanyama, I think one key word is lob. There's going to be a lot of lob opportunities where other defenders, smaller teams that don't have true 7'1", 7'2", 7'3" centers, they're going to get completely dwarfed by Victor Wembanyama. So having a bigger guard who can put the ball up in the air and also take advantage of the defense collapsing in on the weak side is massive. That's why I think Nikola Topic does fit a lot here in San Antonio. And then the other thing about how he doesn't really fit like Luka Doncic, even though he's got great playmaking feel, he can see the floor in a lot of similar ways Doncic can. The difference is Topic doesn't have quite the scoring gravity that Doncic does. Part of what makes Doncic so devastating is that you feel like you have to blitz him at the pick and roll to really have success. You feel like you have to show him bodies, you have to put guys on him, you have to show him a lot of length, size, you have to bring someone over at the rim to really slow him down as a scorer. And that's what opens up a lot of Doncic's dominance as a playmaker, because playmaking without scoring gravity is only so useful, right? There's benefits to it, but there's also moments where we've seen some of the better playmakers in the league, Rajon Rondo, Draymond Green, guys like that historically get sagged off of. And even though they can turn that into advantage by opening up passing lanes and running into dribble handoffs, it also just come playoff time does make you play a little bit of 4-on-5 offensively, where maybe this isn't the best way to maximize Victor Wembanyama. So jury's still out right now on Nikola Topic and how his fit would be with Victor, because I think Topic can score. I'm not saying he can't. He just doesn't have that same scoring gravity that a guy like Doncic does, where you're devastated with him getting shots up, and especially open shots. So Topic, teams are going to go under against him on screens. Teams are going to be a little bit less afraid of him as a scorer, obviously. But I think with that, there's still ways to turn him into a real great offensive engine regardless. So I think the Spurs here, getting Topic does make a ton of sense. Pick number 5, we have the Detroit Pistons here now. Extremely excited about the direction of the Pistons, which I know might sound surprising, but I do think as long as the coaching staff makes adjustments, they've got some of the right pieces in place. I'm a big believer in Cade Cunningham. I think he's growing into an all-star caliber player. I really do. I think Jaden Ivey could have all-star potential still. It's about trying to figure out a way to maximize him. He averaged over 18 points a game when Cade Cunningham did not play this season, and then averaged less than 15 when Cade Cunningham did. So that's a big task for that coaching staff. How do we make both Ivey and Cade Cunningham work together? I think Ivey's got to get more on-ball responsibilities while Cunningham's still on the floor, use some of Cunningham's scoring gravity. So I think the Pistons have ways to improve pretty drastically, pretty quickly, but they need to continue adding more talent. They need to add players who fit, and they need to fix some of the coaching flaws already present with the team. But 5th overall, I have the Pistons selecting guard Reed Sheppard from Kentucky. And I know some Pistons fans, I can already hear you guys typing on your keyboard saying, we don't need another guard. We've spent so many picks on guards the last few years. Yes, you do. You do need another guard. And I don't care about the fact that you drafted Killian Hayes in 2020. I don't care that you drafted Jaden Ivey a couple of years ago, because this guy does different things than those players. Drafting is not about position. It is about skill set. And the Pistons need way more shooting. You're getting the best shooter in this year's draft, shot over 50% from 3 on crazy volume, but he's more than just a shooter. He can handle the basketball. He can make plays off of a live dribble. He can attack closeouts. He can play make for your team a bit. Those are all valuable traits that make him more than just a Malik Beasley. This isn't like signing Malik Beasley. This isn't like signing JJ Redick. This is getting a player who, to me, is like Austin Reeves with shooting capability. And that sounds like a really awesome player. That sounds like a player that's going to have a really fantastic career. I guarantee you Reed Sheppard makes over $100 million in his career, because he has a skill set that is going to fit basically anywhere and everywhere. Teams are going to want him. Teams are going to value him. His secondary playmaking capability is going to be super important. He can toggle between on-ball and off-ball responsibilities, which for Detroit, he's going to be probably more reliant on his off-ball capabilities, which is perfect because that's really his greatest strength. He ranked 100th percentile as a spot-up threat this past year at Kentucky. So this is a premier stand-and-shoot guy. This is a premier movement shooter. This is someone who can really fit next to Cade Cunningham, can really fit next to Jaden Ivey. I understand he's small. I understand it's another guard. But at the end of the day, the Pistons need someone who can really shoot the lights out of the gym. And this guy can really fill it up behind the arc. Pick number 6 now, we have the Charlotte Hornets. And the Hornets, I think, are trending in the right direction as well. I'm actually very, very excited about the direction of the Hornets. After the ownership change, GM change, coaching change, I think this team is going to look very different in the next couple of years. And I'm extremely excited for that because they have not won a playoff series in 20 seasons. So it's been a very long time since the Hornets last advanced in the postseason, but I think they're moving in the right direction. Brandon Miller had a fantastic rookie season. A lot of credit to him, living up to some of that All-NBA potential I think that he still has, that I said pre-draft that he could have. And then also LaMelo Ball, if he can stay healthy, get some of those ankle braces on. We'll see what happens with Charlotte, right? But 6th overall, I have them here selecting guard/forward Ron Holland, and I think defensively is where we're going to see his impact the most. Someone who has, I think, very good size to him, measured in about 6'6.5" without shoes on. So he's got really great wing size. Someone who's going to be about 6'8" with shoes on when he's playing in NBA games. And he, I think, leverages that as a finisher at the rim. But defensively, the thing that really stands out to me is he utilizes his wingspan, 6'11" wingspan. His arms, as Jay Billis would say, go on for days. He impresses me with his overall engine, motor, determination. He gets to basketballs a ton. Now, there are a lot of flaws still in his game. His downhill playmaking is abysmal. He is very turnover prone. He dribbles with his head down a lot. There's a little bit of that Jaylen Brownism, especially young Jaylen Brown coming out of California. A guy who just wasn't really reading defenses, wasn't making weak side reads it all, and kind of made up his mind before really getting to a spot to read and react. And those are some of the flaws that Ron Holland has as well. So for the Hornets, what they have already is really great infrastructure of shooting around him with Miller, with LaMelo Ball. They've got two guys who can handle. They've got guys who can play make off of a live dribble around Holland already. For him, it's kind of about getting him in the door and really working on some of the flaws in his game to at least round him out a little bit, while also trying to maximize his strengths, which is, again, that downhill finishing, the athleticism, the slashing capability. I think the biggest thing is, if I'm Charlotte, I'm telling him, look, we want you to shoot 10 free throws a game. We want you to be a massive foul drawer, because one thing that LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller don't do is get to the free throw line a ton. They're not super high volume free throw shooters because of their play style. So if you can turn Ron Holland into your free throw creator, your guy who's going to get you easy points by getting to the line, getting the other team in foul trouble, that's where I think his offensive fit really is. While defensively, giving you someone who can be a dog on that end of the floor, make plays in the passing lanes, sit down and guard. Very impressed with his overall intensity, and I think one thing that we just need to see from him more is just like the game slowing down around him. And it'll take a while. It's not going to be a year one adjustment where all of a sudden he's in the NBA and he's great at it. It's going to take a couple of years. But I do think for Charlotte, this is a very strong selection for them for sure. Moving on to pick number 7, we have the Portland Trailblazers now at this spot. And I think Portland desperately in need of some wings and forwards, guys who are a little bit bigger bodied, can maybe stretch the floor, maybe make plays off of a live dribble a little bit, especially guys with some potential. So 7th overall, I have them going with forward Matas Buzelis here from the G League Ignite program, and I like Buzelis' game quite a bit. In high school, he really impressed me all the way back to his time at Sunrise Christian, someone who can make plays off of a live dribble, really likes to go to his behind the back. He also has a pretty nice crossover move that he likes to get to, and then he can turn that into finishing opportunities at the rim. For someone his size, standing about 6'10", he's got a creative handle, and he's got some of that downhill burst that you do like, I think, especially in the open floor. Now, in the half court, I think his first step is a little lackluster, but I think if you play him as a power forward and not just a small forward, I've kind of been back and forth on what position I see him being. And that's maybe an advantage, right? Against power forwards, he might be quick enough to beat guys off the dribble. And against small forwards, he might be bigger than them enough to shoot over them. And I think that's where the real benefit is. He likes his turnaround jump shot a lot. He's a little bit of a tweener forward, where he's not a 3, he's not really a 4, he does a little bit of both. And I think there's a real positive to that because it gives you some lineup versatility. Do you want to play bigger? Maybe you play Matas Buzelis at the 3. Now around that, you'd probably need some real shooting. And the Blazers, I think, just need more rebounding as well on the floor. So Buzelis has the size profile, the athletic traits to get to the glass, rebound his position pretty well. And then I think the playmaking there's a lot of work to be had on it yet. I've referenced his ball handling. I think his ball handling's pretty solid, but he does get a little bit of tunnel vision when he's attacking downhill, misses some open kickouts at times. And honestly, like, again, he's a young player who's playing pro basketball this past year. So those are things you can grow on. And those are things in practice that you can teach players, like, hey, I need you to make this pass, I need you to make this read. And over time, they get better at it. So it's not a death sentence that Buzelis has some of these, flaws right now in his game. I think for the most part, there's a lot to be excited about. I think his overall size, athletic profile is very impressive. I think he's a very underrated athlete at this point of the process. So for me here, Portland gets a player who fits their roster. Getting a forward who can do a little bit of everything for them, I think, is huge. One thing that I've always constantly complained about with Portland, even since the Damian Lillard era, was they just never had forwards who were capable of handling the basketball, making plays off of a live dribble. Buzelis is still growing in those areas, but I think he has a lot more upside there than any wing who ever played with Damian Lillard. Yes, Al-Farouq Aminu, I'm looking directly at you. Like, I think Buzelis has a pretty high ceiling that he could reach if things go right in his development, which is why Portland spends this pick on him here in this mock draft. Pick number 8, back to San Antonio, who went with Nikola Topic earlier, and this is where things get a little tricky. And this is why I talked about the Spurs maybe wanting to trade up in this draft, because they've already taken a guard with Buzelis now off the board. Would they go like Donovan Clingan, someone who's a center? And I would say no, probably just because I think Victor Wembanyama is your franchise center moving forward. If you want to really maximize him, I think playing him as the 5 is the smartest thing to do. I know some people will say, well, you have a huge size advantage if you take another big man. Yes, but you also kind of sacrifice some of your spacing. You sacrifice some of your live ball handling capabilities by doing that. So the Spurs maybe get stuck taking another guard here, which is why moving up earlier, getting a wing or a different kind of big like Alex Sarr maybe makes a little bit more sense for them. But now with the reality that I've mocked them Nikola Topic, and now at this pick, I'm going to go with guard Stephon Castle from UConn. And the reason why I'm mocking Stephon Castle here, first of all, there's a ton of reporting right now coming out that the Spurs really like Castle as a prospect. And as a player, he feels like a San Antonio Spur in a lot of ways. His point of attack capabilities defensively, he's another guy like I mentioned with Sheppard. I can see Stephon Castle sticking in the NBA for a long time and making $100+ million because of the role he can fill for a team. He can be a multi-level defender. He can guard 1 through 3 probably. Maybe even at times you could have him guard up to 4s depending on the matchup. And I think just having someone who, again, is a very well-rounded gap-filling type of player who can get on the glass for his position, can guard across multiple positions, can handle the ball for you a bit, can play make off of a live dribble. You can use him as a screen and roll guard, which is unique. Not a ton of teams use that, but I think maybe like the Bruce Brown type of role. I think Stephon Castle could play into that. You could maximize his playmaking that way, put Victor in the dunker spot, and then teams are really at a point where, do we want to help off of Victor right by the rim? That doesn't seem very smart. I think getting someone like Stephon Castle and just really doubling down on playmaking does make some sense here, having both Nikola Topic and Stephon Castle. While yes, there might be some spacing limitations with those two, you're also getting a surplus of playmaking, positional size, your defensive upside goes through the roof. You're just going to be a very big, lengthy, long team. Castle's pretty athletic as well. I think that is a key part here. Topic is not the most athletic guy, so going out and getting another athletic backcourt member in Stephon Castle just opens up your matchups a little bit more here. Defensively, I think the Spurs could become really, really dominant, especially with Wembanyama on the back line. Stephon Castle is your point of attack guy. It's going to be a special combination in San Antonio. Pick number 9, the Memphis Grizzlies here now, and this is a perfect mock draft for Memphis. This is their dream outcome on draft night. I think it couldn't end up any better here for the Grizzlies, who 9th overall select center Donovan Clingan. The Grizzlies badly need a center. I'm still shocked that they traded Steven Adams this season. Obviously, financial implications probably came into play with that decision, but now they have a chance to actually add some real talent back into their center spot, get a true defensive anchor, a true dominant rebounder, an elite screen setter, and someone who I think has really underrated playmaking feel, can toggle in and out of dribble handoffs, can flow into actions as a center. I think he's very ready for the NBA game. The Grizzlies get someone who can be a true anchor to their defense, and I keep harping on that with the Grizzlies, but it's very important. Like I think with Jaren Jackson Jr., who does so many awesome things defensively, he's not a true anchor. He's not going to hold down your defense. He's not going to be the guy who all of a sudden with him on the floor, teams are incapable of scoring. And while it sounds like pretty obvious, I just think that like teams with Jaren Jackson Jr. at center are probably going to struggle because of the rebounding numbers, because of some of his deficiencies. And once you get Donovan Clingan in the building next to a Jaren Jackson Jr., those deficiencies are wiped away. Donovan Clingan, he can rebound the ball, he can box guys out. Maybe you can let Jaren Jackson Jr. go back to roaming and trying to block a ton of shots. And that's where the Grizzlies find a lot of value with Triple J. So having Clingan in the building, not only does he hold down your center spot for the next 8 to 10 years, but you're also maximizing Jaren Jackson Jr. I think you're maximizing Ja Morant. His ability to come off of Clingan screens will be fantastic. And, there's this narrative right now that Clingan doesn't have a ton of upside, and people are doubting his upside and kind of tying his upside to three-point shooting. I don't care if this guy never shoots a single three in the NBA. Be completely honest with you, it does not matter to me. If he becomes a defensive anchor, the upside definitely warrants a top 10 pick. It could even warrant a top 5 pick. I like Clingan's game a lot. I think he's going to be really good in the NBA. I think he's just going to walk it and be an awesome player. And the Grizzlies getting him here at 9, it seems like it could have a similar impact to what Derek Lively has had for the Mavericks as a rookie there in Dallas. Pick number 10, the Utah Jazz now on the clock. And the Utah Jazz are an interesting team to talk about with a pick right here at number 10. Do they look to draft for upside? Do they look for someone who specifically fits their roster, like a point guard right now? What could the Jazz specifically look to do? And I think everything should be centered on upside for Danny Ainge, who at this point, if they continue to hold on to Lauri Markkanen, who knows if they're ever going to get that top 2, 3, 4 pick that they've been really hoping for and wanting since trading away Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. So as a result, the Jazz might never really tank to the bottom. They might just be stuck in the middle a little bit. So getting an upside guy here at 10 is super important. I have them going with forward Cody Williams from Colorado for that reason. I like his ability off of a live dribble to get 2 feet to the paint and finish. He has a ton of rim volume. I think that's one of the most important traits in his game. And people, everyone loves to focus on the three-point shooting, his low volume there. Part of the low volume there is because he has a high rim volume. So from an analytics perspective, it's not that Cody Williams isn't taking threes and he's taking pull-up twos. No, he's getting to the rim. And that is always going to be one of the most efficient play styles in the NBA. You want guys who can get to the rim, and if they're a wing with great length like Cody Williams has it with a 7'1" wingspan, that becomes even more valuable. I think the upside is through the roof with this kid. He has some work to do with his reliability as an on-ball decision maker, ball handler for your overall offense. Right now, he's more of a closeout attacker, transition attacker. But I think that if Cody Williams continues to work on his handle, continues to work on his overall offensive game, especially behind the arc, finding a little bit more consistency, a little bit more reliability in that three-point shot, kind of wavered a little bit at the combine, Cody Williams could blossom into a really, really good player and someone who makes Danny Ainge look really smart once again, 10th overall. Pick 11, we have the Chicago Bulls here now. The Bulls are one of the most fascinating teams because they're kind of stuck in the middle right now, and they could lose DeMar DeRozan potentially. Lonzo Ball might come back next season. You never know what's going to happen, but I think the Bulls here probably just settle on drafting a good player. And while that sounds kind of obvious, like there's players they could take for upside, I just don't know with who's left on the board if that really makes the most sense for Chicago. So instead I have them going with forward/guard Dalton Knecht, someone who is a real wing and can really shoot the three ball. And I think part of when we saw the Bulls at their best this year, it felt like they were getting a lot of good open three-point looks. Think about Kobe White drilling a bunch of threes. Alex Caruso oftentimes coming off of a ball reversal, getting a three-point shot up. Obviously, DeRozan doesn't play that way, but he's creating his own mid-range jump shots that feel like they're automatic. Dalton Knecht gives the Bulls just a little bit of a different play style in terms of how they get that three-point shooting. Caruso's comes off of catch and shoots that are open, and usually ball movement is the byproduct, right? Kobe White gets a lot of his in transition or playing off of a dribble, coming in out of pick and roll into dribble pull-ups. That's where a decent amount of his volume comes from. Obviously some catch and shoots in there and a few others. I'm not saying holistically, but a good majority. Dalton Knecht is an off-ball mover, and that's where the beauty comes for Chicago, getting another guy who can get up three-point looks, but it doesn't have to be a byproduct of good ball movement where the defense is already in rotation. It doesn't have to be open shots against drop coverage. It comes when you're setting a flare screen for him and he finds just enough space and he catches and shoots. Or you run him off of a floppy action, you run him off of pin downs, you use him as your Spain screener, setting your big man up for a roll to the rim. Knecht is going to give Billy Donovan and that Bulls coaching staff a lot of flexibility with their play calling. And while that doesn't sound like the sexiest thing and it doesn't say, oh, Knecht has this huge upside, what it does do is it promotes a lot of different continuity for a team's offense, and getting someone who's an adept off-ball mover, I think, does generally have a better impact than his numbers will ever show. Knecht's not going to, in the NBA, be a 20-point per game scorer, if I had to guess, like he was at Tennessee. He's probably going to settle in between a 10 and 12-point score per game on a night-to-night basis during parts of his career. Maybe more, maybe a little bit less early in his career. I could see him maybe ranging up to 13, 14, 15 points, depending on his situation. But what I do think is his off-ball movement will create confusion, will create opportunities for his teammates to score, get open looks when he draws two guys to his body. Dalton Knecht's going to be very valuable, even if he's not the one actually putting the ball in the hoop. So for that reason, the Bulls get just a flat-out good player here, someone who fits their team, gives them more threes than they're currently taking, and I think that becomes extremely valuable for Billy Donovan's offense. Pick number 12, we're on to the Oklahoma City Thunder here. Extremely excited about the Oklahoma City Thunder as well. There's a lot of questions about if they're going to make a huge trade or not at the draft on the night of the draft or beyond. Obviously, they have so many draft picks, but let's assume they don't, right? They have pick number 12 here from the Houston Rockets. How do they look to use this pick? And I think one thing Thunder fans can all agree on, they probably just need more size. And I'm not talking about a center. That's essential here. The Thunder do not want a center who is going to clog down the paint, take away driving lanes, and put defenses in a spot where they're able to camp their center at the rim. That's not what the Thunder want. The Thunder want guys who can still space the floor. So the best case for them here is they either find a second Chet Holmgren, which is almost impossible because they don't make those guys. They don't just grow on trees. What they're going to really look for is a four-man who can shoot it a bit, can play with a live dribble, and is athletic. And that's still a very rare thing, but they have an upside swing here with forward Tidjane Salaun from Cholet, another L&B Pro A prospect in this year's draft. We talked about Risacher earlier. Tidjane Salaun has a lot of awesome traits to his game. Now, I think the big thing for him is how consistent can he put those traits together, and how consistent does he find the success on the basketball court. And consistency is a byproduct of talent. That's a big thing I believe in. Consistency is not a trait. Consistency is how good you are. If you're extremely consistent against any type of defense, any type of defender, it means you're really darn good. If you're not consistent, it means some nights a certain kind of defense, a certain kind of defender can get you off your spots, can get in your head, and knock you off your game. And for Salaun right now, he's young, so it's okay to be inconsistent at this point. And with the right amount of reps and the right professional development, and if he gets the right player developmental team around him, which OKC's always great at, they could turn him into an awesome, and I mean really awesome player, because he has a lot of the tools and traits that you do like in a player that you're looking to play power forward in the NBA. He's got the size at about 6'10". His arms are, above average. He's got a great wingspan for his frame, and he's extremely athletic. He's quick in short areas. He's got good long speed as well. Somebody who I think just overall does impress with his physical traits. And then from an offensive standpoint, he's cut pretty well when he has operated as a cutter. He also does a pretty solid job, in my opinion, of spacing the floor and finding open space to shoot threes. That's another important part of shooting. It's not just coming down to knock down. It doesn't come down to just knocking down your open shots. It's how do you find that open space? Do you lift well? Do you push down into the corner at the right times? I think Salaun does a lot of those things decently well right now. And with a little bit more coaching, a little bit more development, he could turn into an absolute home run pick here as the greatest gap filler for OKC's biggest weakness right now, which is just more front court size. So Salaun could be a really, really strong pickup for the Thunder here. And in this mock draft, goes to Sam Presti at this spot. Pick 13, we have the Sacramento Kings here. And in a lot of my previous mocks, I've been mocking Jared McCain. And my biggest reason for that was looking at his off-ball fit most predominantly next to Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. And while I think that's a really great way of looking at it for Sacramento, I also think that maybe the Kings internally view it differently with the likely loss of someone like Malik Monk. Maybe they feel like they have to find more shot creation, someone else who can come off the bench and be a shot creator for them. So 13th overall, I have the Sacramento Kings going with guard Devin Carter from Providence. The big difference between Devin Carter and Jared McCain, Devin Carter had way more on-ball responsibility throughout his college career, and especially this past season. He's a little bit more NBA ready as well. As an older prospect, I think he steps in and plays real NBA minutes on night one of his career. And with the real emergence of Keon Ellis, maybe there's not a lot of pressure for Devin Carter to be a 25-30 minute per game guy early, but I think the expectation would be that he's playing 18 to 23 minutes a night and is pretty relied upon to be someone in the half court that goes and gets up shots. He had a pretty dynamic shot creation profile both out of the pick and roll and in isolation this past year for Providence, somebody who he's got a really good pull-up jump shot. And I think if there's a player in this class who kind of has a false ceiling, a player who most people are going to look at and say, well, he's kind of capped because he's a little bit older, doesn't really have like the elite shooting, doesn't have really an elite trait, Devin Carter's going to get looked at that way. I think he could be somebody who grows into a very surprising player because of how his shot diet looks presently constructed. He's somebody who has been tasked in an offense that lacked a lot of talent around him, he was tasked with creating a ton of the offense. And then defensively, I think he helped Sacramento as well because he's got a real mean streak on that end of the floor. He's competitive. He does his best to stay attached to the ball handler. He rides hips extremely well. And then from there, he becomes a defensive playmaker, blocked a ton of shots at the rim as a 6'2.5" guard. The tape suggests he's going to be a really great defender. Now defensively, when it comes to his overall frame and size, there are still some limitations, and the analytics don't necessarily suggest he's going to be fantastic, but he's somebody who is going to make timely plays on the defensive end of the floor, and I think that's one thing that Sacramento, if they're looking for more shot creation around Fox and Sabonis, this is where Carter has some real value, and then defensively, I think they could really find a lot of value for him as well in that role, replacing Malik Monk going into next season. Pick number 14, the Portland Trailblazers are back now on the clock. Remember, we went with Matas Buzelis for them 7th overall, now 14th overall. The Blazers do have a good number of options here. I have them going with center/forward Kyle Filipowski from Duke. And I think for Portland, I wanted to mock Kel'el Ware. I've mocked Kel'el Ware in the past quite a bit. I think that it's also possible the Blazers look at their center situation and say, we kind of like DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, and Duop Reith as a center trio. Now, for me, I'm a little less moved by that grouping. I do think the Blazers could still afford to take a center, but taking someone like Filipowski, maybe he can play some center minutes for you at times and play like a smaller brand of basketball and really space the floor out for Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson. Maybe that's where you find some real value. But you could also play him as a 4, and that's why this pick maybe makes a little bit more sense for me in this mock draft, because he has some of that positional versatility in the front court where you can afford to play him as a small ball big at times, but you can also play him as your power forward and get a little bit bigger on the court, where he's standing about 6'10" without shoes on, so he's got really strong size for a power forward. He doesn't have great size for a center though, so he's a little bit of a tweener, but I think with his offensive game, someone who in college handled the basketball, created his own shot a bit, handled the ball in the pick and roll, also has reps as the pick and roll screener. He's versatile. He's going to come into the NBA with a lot of on-ball reps already logged. He's going to be comfortable scaling down into a different role because of the way he's played throughout his high school career, and just looking at times how Jon Scheyer used him at Duke. Off the ball as well, I think there's a lot for Filipowski to grow into and blossom into as a player. So 14th overall, the Blazers get him here. I think he's a really good fit next to Scoot Henderson, and I think he can coexist with their current center group in duration of time, in stretches. So we'll see what happens. 14, I think the Blazers are a really interesting team. This is another team I could see packaging picks to move up, because 7 and 14 feels a little awkward at times for them, depending on who's been available, who hasn't. So if Portland got aggressive on draft night, I'd be very happy for them if they found a way to move up into the top 4, top 5, and really kind of shake up the draft a little bit. I think Portland could be a team worth watching for in that regard, so we'll see what the Blazers do. But Kyle Filipowski here in this mock draft at number 14. Pick number 15, the Miami Heat now on the clock, and the Heat, very fascinating team. One thing I've mocked a ton for them is guard play, and while I think that is still somewhat of a need, especially kind of how the season ended, and obviously they've had a lot of departures. They also did trade for Terry Rozier this year, and they have Jimmy Butler, they have Tyler Hero, so maybe I've been a little too focused on guards. I've kind of, as I go through these mocks, obviously I spend hours and hours putting them together and rethinking everything, because that's one of the best parts is you talk through every possible scenario, and then you're like, well, if this guy's here, would the Heat do this? What would they do? And as each mock draft kind of plays out a little bit differently, you're like, well, if this guy's available, that would be great. So for the Heat, I've kind of reimagined what they could look to do, and this guy kind of falls to them here. 15th overall, I have center Kel'el Ware out of Indiana. And while Bam Adebayo is one of the best defenders in the league, made All-NBA, or All-Defense first team this year, I think getting a backup big behind him who's a little bit bigger, a little bit more of an aerial rim deterrent, Kel'el Ware's huge. And I think, I talked earlier about Donovan Clingan having a similar impact to Derek Lively in his rookie season, and while I stand by that, I think Kel'el Ware kind of comps to Derek Lively, a super long athletic center, can finish above the rim, and at his best is going to be a pick and roll play finisher at the rack. And I think that's something Miami doesn't have a ton of right now. They don't have a ton of real true rim gravity, a ton of rim presence. Obviously, they've got Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero as high-volume three-point shooters. They've got some real mid-range creators in Jimmy Butler and Terry Rozier. Bam Adebayo's got one of the better floaters in the NBA. Just a really talented big man and a really talented overall group, right? They just need a little bit more size, a little bit more bounce, a little bit more athleticism in the front court, which is why I thought Kel'el Ware made a ton of sense here. He falls outside of the lottery here in this mock draft. I like him a lot in this overall class. I think he's going to have a very good NBA career. And 15th overall, the Heat get him, make him their backup center for the next 5 years, get really good production out of him. And I think it elevates them against some of the most dominant teams in the league as well. When you're battling against a team like New York, who's extremely physical, you need more athleticism, you need more size, and I think Kel'el Ware helps them quite a bit. Number 16, we have the Philadelphia 76ers here now. Very good chance that they trade this pick on draft night. We'll see what happens, but there's also the possibility of them taking someone who is pro-ready, someone who can step in and find a real role early on. That could be an upperclassman, or it could be a freshman with a very defined skill set. And that's the exact direction I took here in this mock draft. 16th overall, I have the Philadelphia 76ers selecting guard Jared McCain out of Duke. I think his skill set most specifically really fits what Philadelphia is somewhat lacking. I think they really need more shooting on the floor, very reliable shooting. Jared McCain is exactly that. But what they also need in addition to that is someone who has a little bit more on-ball capability, a little bit more guard play around Tyrese Maxey. And I think in Tyrese Maxey's first playoffs without James Harden, I think that there's been a little bit of a learning curve for him. I think Tyrese Maxey played really well, by the way. I'm not trying to trash Tyrese Maxey, but I think the Sixers as a team just didn't have a ton of playmaking and ball handling around him. They had guys who could swing the ball, reverse it. You think about Nick Batum, who's one of the best touch passers in the league. They need someone who I think has some of that shooting gravity, though, like Buddy Hield does, but who's also able to make a play off the bounce, and that's Jared McCain here. Was very successful for the Blue Devils this past year in pick-and-roll reps. Now when you scale him into the NBA, he's not going to be quite as efficient, quite as productive, but I do think he's going to turn into a rather quality player and someone who, like I said, has a very defined skill set and role. He's going to play off the basketball most predominantly, can sometimes trigger little initiations in your offense. Do you want to run a pick and roll? Do you want to get an offense flowing? Jared McCain can do some of those things for you as well, while still being a real gravity shooter. And I think if the Sixers keep this pick, they need someone who fits a role immediately based on how aggressive they're going to be this offseason. Jared McCain, I think, fits the bill, 16th overall for Philly. Number 17, the Los Angeles Lakers here now. Important to note, the Pelicans could keep this pick. They have until June 1st. So later this week, we will know definitively whether or not the Lakers actually have this selection. As of right now, my very, very well-based assumption is that the Lakers will keep this pick. So 17th overall, I have the Los Angeles Lakers selecting forward Tyler Smith from the G League Ignite program. Third G League Ignite program alum we've had here in the top 17 picks. And I like Tyler Smith's game from an overall upside perspective. I think he can make a good deal of sense. And looking at what Rob Pelinka has drafted in recent years, he has looked at upside and he's looked at players with really solid positional size. And Tyler Smith, who projects to be a real power forward, he measured in extremely well at the combine. I think I was honestly very impressed with his overall measurements. Surprised me in a positive way with how he measured in at the combine from both a length and weight standpoint. And for the Lakers, who I think just need more shooting, Tyler Smith, the hope is he turns into a really good shooter at some point down the road. Shot 36% from three on the NBA three-point line this past year for the G League Ignite program. Now, the hard thing is with evaluating G League Ignite players is the team lost a bunch of games. Most of the games were garbage time, honestly, down by 20-something points. So I think for me, the big thing is the skills, right? He's super athletic. He's got a pretty smooth shooting stroke. He shoots a ton of mid-range jump shots, so if you can back him up a little bit, get him to shoot more threes, eliminate some of those mid-range twos, get him to the rim a little bit more. It's not about shooting 7, 8, 9 threes a game. He shot 4 of them this past year. It's about eliminating some of those mid-range shots as a role player, turning them into either rim volume or three-point volume. And if he adjusts his game that way, I think he'd be really, really awesome in the league in a lot of different ways and a lot of different team compositions. And the Lakers, who could always use more size, a little bit more length, and more shooting, I think Tyler Smith checks a lot of those boxes for LA at this point in time. Pick 18, we're on to the Orlando Magic. I almost got the TikTok theme song stuck in my head because every time I say this team's name out loud now, that's what I think of. So shout out to TikTok. But here we are now, 18th overall, Orlando at this spot. I'm fascinated by Orlando this offseason. I think they can make a big trade. I think that they could draft and keep developing. They could do any number of things. They could go out in free agency and spend. I am so stoked about the Orlando Magic and where they're headed, where they're going. They have a real chance at upgrading their team this offseason. I think they should take that direction. But 18th overall, I have them here selecting guard Isaiah Collier out of USC. And Collier is a player I've been very critical of in the past for many reasons. One, he slows the game down a ton. He doesn't really have a readiness to play off the catch like I highlighted to start this mock with Zaccharie Risacher. He's somebody who I think defensively there's a lot of complications and concerns with everything I saw on film from him this year. But there is real definitive things to love about his game as well. And that is rim pressure, rim gravity, finishing below the rim, and playmaking feel. Those things all really blow me away with Collier, who has a tremendous first step. He's really, really quick off the bounce. He's a walking paint touch. He can get 2 feet in the paint, draw in the defense, and he does a good job using his strength, physicality. He's built like a linebacker, so he can be a little bit of a bowling ball going downhill into bigger bodies, knocking them off the spot, winning at the point of contact. I think is a huge thing in Isaiah Collier's game that other guard prospects just don't have in this draft. So Collier, who's going to be very reliant on below the rim finishing and playmaking and not really the most adept shooter at this point, those are all going to be red flags for him. And I honestly do believe Collier is going to have one of the worst rookie seasons among everyone in this first round mock because of his playstyle, because of his overall size and his adjustment to the NBA. I think is going to be very stark, but that's not a total condemnation on his career. I think his career could end up turning out very, very well with the right development. If his pull-up jump shot takes meaningful strides forward, he could turn into a really awesome player, and Orlando gets a guard who can be a real offense initiator. I like Banchero and Wagner having the ball in their hands. I think it's important that you continue to find ways to get them the rock and have them be your creators, but getting one more creator in the building, in the organization, I don't think would be bad either. I like Collier's game. I think he can be very, very usable and reliable for Orlando a couple of years into his career. Pick number 19, the Toronto Raptors here now at this spot. This pick comes from the Indiana Pacers, part of the Pascal Siakam deal. And I think the Raptors here with this pick, it's important for them to value some more size. They have Jakob Poeltl, obviously. They drafted Christian Koloko a couple years ago. Unfortunately, he had some health concerns, no longer with the team presently. But Toronto, I still think, could use another center in the building and someone who could really provide a lot of rim gravity around Scottie Barnes to give Scottie Barnes a rim finishing threat. Someone who could sit on the opposite side, the weak side, and maybe even be a good screen and roll partner with Barnes and with some of the other guards that Toronto over time is developing. Obviously, Emmanuel Quickley is the headliner there. So 19th overall, I have the Toronto Raptors selecting center Zach Edey from Purdue. Funny enough, he's Canadian. That doesn't really play into the reason why I mocked him here, but I'm sure Toronto fans would love him even more because of that. I think the biggest thing with Zach Edey is his size. He's huge, so he is. I think he's just a really intriguing prospect because people are going to look at the size and they're going to look at the collegiate statistical production. They're going to say, why is this guy not the first overall pick? Totally understand that. Part of the reason why he's not is you're very limited in what you can do with him from a scheme standpoint. Defensively, you gotta probably play him in deep drop coverage. He's huge, but he's not super mobile. Now, he's worked very, very hard on his body. I know people are going to bring up the combine testing where he ran the court extremely well, 3/4 court sprint speed. He did the lane agility drill really, really well. At the end of the day, I'm going to trust my eyes in the film over how he tested at a combine because really, he doesn't have the hip fluidity of some of the other bigs in this year's class, but I do think 19th overall, it makes a ton of sense for Toronto. Someone who's going to be a long-term successor to Jakob Poeltl. Zach Edey's got fantastic hands. He can be a tremendous pick-and-roll player offensively, and then defensively, he's going to deter shots at the rim. So for the Raptors to take meaningful steps forward defensively, Edey will be their main primary rim protector. And then offensively, giving someone who, when he sits in the pocket, is a real threat. He's going to draw bodies to the rim. For Toronto, the more shooting that they put around the combination of Edey and Scottie Barnes, the better. They've already started doing that with Kelly Olynyk. They have that with Obviously, Grady Dick, who they took last year. So the Raptors have been adding some shooting. Zach Edey, I think, gives them some real rim gravity next to Barnes. People are going to say, well, doesn't that make it harder for him to finish at the rim? No. Anthony Edwards got a lot better actually finishing at the rim when they had Rudy Gobert on the roster with him because of rim gravity. It puts bigs in a spot where they don't want to leave the rim presence all by himself right by the rack. So I think having Zach Edey on the floor would be really good for Toronto. I think he could have a real dominant role there as a role player. Pick 20, the Cleveland Cavaliers now on the clock. And I think Cleveland is one of the more difficult teams to mock for. They have a lot of questions about their roster right now. Will Donovan Mitchell be there long term? Will Darius Garland be there long term? How about the big men? Will they ever break up Evan Mobley and Jared Allen? A lot of questions, which makes it very difficult to decide what to do here for Cleveland. So 20th overall, I landed on forward Tristan da Silva, who is more of a gap-filling type of prospect, because whenever there's difficulties trying to mock a specific play style, specific position, it's pretty nice to have a band-aid guy like Tristan da Silva who's like pretty good at everything. And it sounds like, oh, if he's pretty good at everything, why isn't he going earlier? Athletically, there are some limitations to his game, in my opinion, especially defensively, that you'll see on a team defense level. He might get hunted a bit, and there's some things about him like challenging when he's in rotation. Like, is he going to be able to close out effectively without getting blown by it? Like, those are some of the questions I have about Tristan da Silva. But offensively, he's got a pretty smooth stroke. He shoots the ball respectably well. He can handle the ball a bit. He can initiate some pieces of your offense a little bit. He's not a point guard by any means, or a point forward or anything like that. But he can handle the ball a bit. He can make plays off of a live dribble. Honestly, just a pretty impressive overall player. And for Cleveland, a team that there's really a lot of questions around right now, I think picking someone who has like kind of a safe range of outcomes like Tristan da Silva makes a ton of sense. I think his overall skill set, his feel for the game, his offensive capabilities probably cover a multitude of sins depending on what happens there in Cleveland. So someone like da Silva for me just made a ton of sense here. It's kind of a cop-out pick, to be honest, because maybe there's some guys with higher potential. Maybe Cleveland looks a few different directions. Maybe they want to continue to beef up certain areas of their team, but Tristan da Silva feels like a safe kind of glue guy who fits in around the other pieces and kind of cements the way that your team is built. So I like da Silva here for Cleveland. I think he'd be a really solid, strong pickup. Pick 21, we're on to the New Orleans Pelicans now. This pick comes from the Milwaukee Bucks, and what is a pick swap? The Bucks now pick 23rd. The Pelicans here now at this spot, what do they look to do? I have them going with guard Carlton Carrington, and every single mock, I keep flip-flopping. Do they go guard? Do they go center? Do they go guard? Do they go center? Center makes a ton of sense because they need someone who is either a more dominant rim roller or someone who has real three-point capabilities as a center. That's hard to find, but there's a couple of options in this draft. I considered them here for this pick. On the flip side, they probably need a point guard. And Carlton Carrington, I think, has a lot of upside to grow into. For Pittsburgh, he did pretty much everything. He handled the basketball, he shot the basketball, he passed a ton. He was their primary creator of their offense. And then he also got in the glass, and he's got pretty decent size and length to him as well to defensively be somewhat of a competitor. The Pelicans have spent picks trying to find guards. They drafted Dyson Daniels. I didn't love that pick. I looked at Dyson Daniels more as a wing prospect with playmaking feel than a true point guard because of his handle. I think that's been pretty well vindicated through the first couple of years of his career. Playmaking isn't synonymous to point guard play, and I think Carlton Carrington is more of a true point guard, which is why I think he can be a very positive pick here for the Pelicans because he also has the ability to create his own shot. He's a very good pull-up mid-range creator, and the hope is that with the right amount of reps and the right development and over time just overall development in general, you're hoping Carlton Carrington turns from an elite pull-up mid-range jump shooter to a very good three-point shooter. And he impressed at the Combine. He did. Now, his jump shooting was really slow at the Combine. I don't know how reliably he's going to get that off against NBA defenses. So there's going to be a work in progress in speeding up his jump shot, making him a little bit more reliable as a three-point shooter at the NBA level. So it's not like day one he's coming in and he's getting the starting point guard spot. This is a pick for the next couple of years. The Pelicans draft him, probably wait a couple of years to really see all of the benefits of selecting him 21st overall, but the upside is very, very high with him. I like his size, skill set profile, his ability to get two spots on the floor and operate as a scorer while also still making plays and reads with a live handle. So Carrington to me stands out as a great pick here for the Pelicans, and if they don't go center, I expect them to go point guard. They do so here with Carlton Carrington, 21st overall. Moving on to pick 22, the Phoenix Suns here now. There's a rumor going around that they might draft Bronny James with this pick. That's not what I'm mocking here, though. And I just do not think LeBron James is going to be a Phoenix Sun. Sorry, Suns fans. You're probably disappointed. Just would be shocked if LeBron is in Phoenix at the end of the day. 22nd overall, I have the Suns selecting center Yves Missi from Baylor. And one of my biggest complaints about the Suns when they put together the big three of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant was the overlapping play style of mid-range shot creation and the reliance on the worst shot in basketball, which is mid-range jump shots. Now, I don't hate mid-range jump shots as much as most analytics guys do. I'm not a huge believer in the calculator. I think when you watch games, like, defenses give those shots up most often because of the analytics, which makes them good shots at times. If you can get open shots in the NBA, especially in the playoffs, those are good shots to take. But the one thing is that I differ from people who are just like eye test only, like Ball Don't Stop, for example, where they say, oh, well, you know, the game's about a bucket. Yeah, at the end of the game, it is. But throughout the course of the duration of a game, you need to have guys who are three-point shooters. You need to exert rim pressure. And that's why Yves Missi, I think, makes a ton of sense 22nd overall here for Phoenix. He is a freak athlete who defensively can make freak plays, offensively just gets his head above the rim, plays above the rim. He's like an NFL tight end. You just put the ball up there, he's going to go get it. He is super freakishly athletic. He's really relatively raw. Like, he's new to basketball. But there's a lot of different ways you can use him. I think positioning is going to be a difficult thing to coach him up in and to really maximize with him. But Mike Budenholzer, their new head coach, is the best maximizer of eliminating all of the issues with your low-hanging fruit. Mike Budenholzer walks through, he picks up all the low-hanging fruit, he makes sure your team is well coached, and he's going to get you to probably 50 wins because he's that smart. He just walks into 50 wins every single year, seemingly. So Yves Missi, someone who I think complements the Suns roster by being a good screen setter and a great downhill roller with a lot of physical prowess and dominance, that's where he's going to have a real impact because he's going to get to the rim way quicker than Jusuf Nurkic ever did. He's going to give them some of those woe plays defensively that they're just lacking. They don't have a collection of great point of attack defenders. I think the value of a rim protector who's really mobile, really athletic would have a lot of impact on the Suns moving forward. This is the type of pick that could really change the direction of their franchise. So we'll see. Maybe the Suns spend it on Bronny James. Maybe they trade the pick, or maybe they do what's actually smart and they draft a player who fits what they need. Yves Missi is a really good complement to some of their existing flaws and really a good solution to some of them as well. So I think the Suns, 22nd overall, do a great job here in this mock, grabbing Yves Missi out of Baylor. 23rd overall, we're on to the Milwaukee Bucks, a team that needs more defense, but they also have a couple of players that they could lose this year in free agency, including guard Malik Beasley, who had a heck of a season for them, especially throughout the regular season, shot and made a ton of threes, and I really liked that signing for them when they got him. Obviously played in predominantly a starting role until Patrick Beverley took that over by the end of the year, but the Bucks now at this spot are probably going to lose Malik Beasley for nothing in free agency. That's just the reality of it. When you sign someone to a minimum contract, you're probably not going to retain him for very long. The Bucks now are likely to lose Malik Beasley, so 23rd overall, they need some more shooting. I have them going with guard Jacoby Walter out of Baylor, and I think one of the big positives about Jacoby Walter, not only is he a big-time three-point shooter, that's his greatest strength coming into the NBA, but there's some physical traits to like as well. He's, I think, a pretty solid, respectable athlete. I think he's more athletic than Malik Beasley, a little bit bigger than Malik Beasley, but he's got a lot more length than Malik Beasley, measured in very well at the combine from a size and wingspan perspective, measured in about 6'4.5" without shoes on, so he's about a 6'6" 2 guard. He's got decent size to him then, and again, that wingspan is going to help cover up some of his defensive liabilities. Not even the best way to say it, but like some of his defensive shortcomings, I think, will be kind of covered up by his length. And at the end of the day, length is one of the most important things. And you know, people point to length and they'll showcase blocks, they'll showcase steals. I think really what we see in length is like the weird plays where a guy looks like he's going to be open and then all of a sudden he hesitates to shoot at the rim. It's because of length, or he misses what seems to be like it's going to be an open shot and all of a sudden there's a kind of a late contest in there. That's length, where it seems like a player's going to be open, he starts to expect one thing and then something else just kind of appears out of nowhere. That's usually an arm or a limb. Like, having extra length on the floor is always beneficial, and I think for Milwaukee specifically, without sacrificing the shooting, listen, Jacoby Walter's not going to shoot as well as Malik Beasley did last year. That's just the reality. but without sacrificing a ton of shooting, you're going to get more length and you're going to get a little bit more athletic. And I think those are things the Bucks really badly need here. Jacoby Walter, I think, is a really strong pickup, 23rd overall for Milwaukee in this mock draft. 24th, we have the New York Knicks here now. They have 2 picks on draft night. If you wanted to know as a Knicks fan what would happen if the Knicks trade them, that'll be in the video that comes out tomorrow. So you're seeing this on Tuesday, May 28th. The next video, Wednesday, May 29th, is going to be a draft night trades video. That's a little bit of a spoiler, so if you're watching to this point, shout out to you guys. You get a little bit of a spoiler a day ahead of time. But here we are, the Knicks now. First of all, their first pick, 24th, comes from the Mavericks. Then 25th, they have their own selection as well. 24th, I have them going with center Daron Holmes II. Isaiah Hartenstein is a pending free agent this offseason. There is a chance that they could lose him for nothing, which would obviously be very devastating. But also the reality is, let's say even that they're able to retain Isaiah Hartenstein, which there's a pretty good chance that they do. The reality is Mitchell Robinson has missed a lot of time throughout his career. So getting just one more reliable center in the room, someone who can shoot the ball, gives you a different kind of center than what you currently have. Hartenstein obviously wins off of touch. He's a great screen setter. Mitchell Robinson's a dynamic, dominant offensive rebounder, arguably the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. You have those things already in place. So Daron Holmes gives you something different. Someone who's a pick and pop big, pick and roll big, has really good hands, has a nice right baby hook. He's a little bit different than both of them, which gives Thibodeau one more option to play. Now, the reality is Daron Holmes II probably get a ton of DNP CDs because Tom Thibodeau loves to play his 8-9-man rotation throughout the regular season and then shrink it down to about 4.5 guys for the playoffs. That's a joke. That's a joke. Take a deep breath, Knicks fans. But Daron Holmes II, I think, an awesome prospect here for the Knicks. He has a ton of experience in college. He's a junior who has set probably more screens than anybody else in this entire draft. So I like his game. I like his fit in New York. I think he could form a really good dynamic 2-man game with Jalen Brunson, which is what really pushes the pick to the edge for me here on why Daron Holmes II makes a ton of sense for the Knicks. 25, staying on the topic of New York, the Knicks are here yet again, and I have them selecting forward Johnny Furphy. So that's why trading these picks makes sense, because it feels like neither of these guys are going to be like mainstays in their rotation right away. There's just not a lot of minutes to go around for some of these guys, which is why the Knicks might push some of these draft picks back, keep their trade flexibility open, which is what I do expect from them a little bit. But in the event that they do draft, Johnny Furphy, I think, does make some good deal of sense as well as a draft and develop prospect, someone who has all of the right volume for a role player. A lot of three-point volume, a lot of rim volume. He cuts decently well. I just wish he would do it more. And in transition, he does a good job getting all the way to the rim, finishing above the rim and below the rim. I think he does a solid job as well. I think he's a really sound and solid prospect. He's not going to be a star. He's not going to be someone you have dribble 3, 4, 5 times a possession. He's a role player. But I think for the Knicks, you already have your core nucleus in place. You have your franchise point guard in Jalen Brunson. You have another dynamic half-court scorer in Julius Randle. You have your contributing role players around that in Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby. You've got your center play. It's just about shooting. Guys who can shoot, finish at the rim, that's really where the value is. Johnny Furphy, I think, just checks a lot of those boxes, makes a ton of sense, and the Knicks walk away pretty happy with Holmes and Furphy at 24 and 25. Number 26, we have the Washington Wizards here from the LA Clippers. Remember, I had them get Alex Sarr in this mock draft, 2nd overall. So they've addressed the franchise center spot. Now it's time to address the franchise point guard spot. And that might sound crazy at 26th overall, but this guy right now, I have him as a lottery grade in this year's draft. AJ Mitchell out of UC Santa Barbara. This kid is the epitome of dribble, pass, and shoot. That is at the heart and forefront of my evaluation for players offensively. If they can dribble, pass, and shoot, they're going to be good NBA players. Think back to a guy last year that I liked a lot was Brandon Podziemski, someone who I thought could really dribble, pass, and shoot, ended up making all-rookie first team for the Golden State Warriors, unsurprisingly to me. He was the 19th pick in the draft, and I liked him a lot coming into the class because of his overall ability to dribble, pass, and shoot. AJ Mitchell's got all 3 of those characteristics as well. He was the lead point guard for UC Santa Barbara, passes the ball relatively well. But I think the biggest thing about him is a lot of his passing comes as a byproduct and as a result of his scoring gravity. He gets 2 feet in the paint, gets to spots where he can score the basketball. He can get defense off balance with a series of pump fakes. He plays off of 2 feet well. And for Washington specifically, why does he make so much sense? They have the need for a real true point guard ball handler who can score. Jordan Poole, he's fun. At the end of the season, started to take some real steps forward again as a playmaker. I hope he can continue that and sustain that. But in the event that he doesn't, you need to find and take stabs at guys who can become a franchise-level point guard. I think A.J. Mitchell is going to turn into a starting point guard in the NBA. I think he's someone who's very sound, steady, reliable, plays with good ball security. He just does everything that you want out of a guard. I think he's very creative in tight spaces. And honestly, I just think he's a good player. Again, it's at the heart of my analysis. Dribble, pass, and shoot. Kid can do it all. Defensively, maybe a little outmatched at times. That's why defensively, there's no dribble, pass, shoot. It's how can you guard? How, your length, size, versatility, athletic traits obviously play a huge impact. But, A.J. Mitchell is someone who's going to get overlooked. They're going to, point to some of the deficiencies. They're going to point to him not being a massive. I just think he's very well rounded. I think he's very solid. I think very reliable. And I think Washington here wins the draft, getting Alex Sarr 2nd overall and A.J. Mitchell 26th overall. 27, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves here now, who are on the brink of elimination against the Dallas Mavericks. We'll see how the series concludes. But the Wolves just have not looked like themselves at all. Karl-Anthony Towns has had a terrible Western Conference Finals, missing a ton of open shots, playing off balance, not really getting to 2 feet very reliably, and it's honestly just been hard to watch because it's not the team. I've watched all 82 games plus this year of the Timberwolves. Obviously, you guys know I watch every single NBA team as much as I possibly can, but I have a specific role covering the Timberwolves. So for Minnesota, they just haven't looked like themselves. And you have to credit Dallas. You have to credit Jason Kidd doing a great job using Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford as weak side shot blockers. That has really flustered and made the Timberwolves struggle. And as a byproduct, their season is on the cusp of ending. So who could they add in the draft? 27th overall, I have them selecting guard Tyler Kolek out of Marquette. For a team that really prides itself on playmaking, they've struggled in this playoffs, especially in this Western Conference Finals when it comes to reliability and playmaking and ball security. Outside of Mike Conley, they don't have a lot of ball secure players. Anthony Edwards is a little bit turnover prone. Karl-Anthony Towns is very turnover prone. Kyle Anderson, even though he's not super turnover prone, some of his floaters and dead possessions he causes by dribbling out the shot clock feel like turnovers. Like getting someone like Tyler Kolek, who's ball secure, can run pick and rolls, knows how to hit the pocket, knows how to hit weak side. He's just like a very well-rounded point guard prospect. And listen, Minnesota internally really values playmaking. So someone like Tyler Kolek, who is going to be a long-term backup point guard, even though it's not the sexiest pick here for Minnesota, it's a guy who can play. He's better than Jordan McLaughlin. He's going to be better than Monte Morris, who is an expiring contract anyway. The Wolves, who are going to have some real needs this offseason after losing some guys. Tyler Kolek slots in, plays right away. He could be part of their real rotation going into next year as a 15-minute per game backup point guard. And again, it's not the sexiest pick. It's not the, oh my gosh, this is the huge needle mover. This is a, hey, we need to be proactive about making sure we're not losing talent out the door and not replacing it in our existing rotation. They don't have a real backup point guard on roster going into next season. Behind Mike Conley, Tyler Kolek, cheap, affordable, someone who can play right away. I think it just makes a ton of sense for the Wolves, who need more reliable playmaking with some of it going out the door. Pick 28, the Denver Nuggets here now. Obviously a very disappointing end to the season for them, but I think going into next year, assuming the band's all back together, they're going to be a real threat to win the whole thing again. I don't think anyone wants to deal with Nikola Jokic in a 7-game series. Even the Wolves, who are very well equipped to deal with him, almost couldn't. So the Nuggets are going to be a devastating, dominant team going into next year again. It's about trying to find talent that fits their roster right now, and that's why I have them going with center Adem Bona from UCLA. And I think one thing about the Nuggets, they like to use Nikola Jokic at the level of the screen. They like to hedge and try and force the ball handler wide. Adem Bona could be another version of that defensively. He's extremely athletic. He's very comfortable defending out on the perimeter for a big man. He didn't measure in great, measured in under 6'9" without shoes on, but there's a lot of bigs in the league right now that are similarly sized to Adem Bona, and his overall defensive versatility, his scheme versatility on the defensive end of the floor is really the reason why Denver gets him here. Not only is he athletic enough to challenge shots at the rim, that's something the Nuggets have to do better as a team as well. That's what really was their killing fatal flaw against the Timberwolves, was anytime Minnesota got to the rim, it just felt like an easy finish. Adem Bona helps you in that regard when Jokic is off the floor. He gives you another rim rolling presence. He could be a lob threat next to Jokic if you ever decided to play the two of them together. Now, I wouldn't suggest doing that, but you never know. Michael Malone might try things. Nikola Jokic is basically a point guard. He could play with anybody, in my opinion. So you never know, right? Adem Bona just has a really good collection of physical traits. He's an above-the-rim finisher offensively. He's going to just be a pick-and-roll man. He's not going to give you a ton else offensively, but really you're getting him for his defensive work, for how mobile he is as a big man, how athletic he is. He makes some incredible defensive plays. Like we highlighted with Yves Missi for Phoenix at 22, Adem Bona a year older than him, and I think honestly a lot more well-rounded, a lot more solid right now, a lot more reliable. So I like Adem Bona quite a bit. I think he's going to walk into the NBA and have a role. I think the Nuggets would do really well picking him 28th overall. Moving on to 29, we have the Utah Jazz here now. Obviously, earlier on, they went with Cody Williams. Now the Jazz have an opportunity to take some more upside, and that's what I've been really harping on for Danny Ainge here in this mock draft is upside, upside, upside for Utah. And 29th overall, I have them going with a guard in Nikola Jurisic, who probably fits in more as a combo guard. Measured in really well at the combine, 6'7" without shoes on. So if you're looking at him as a point guard, that's elite positional size. Now, I don't think he has a true point guard skill set. I don't think he can be the number one primary ball handler for a good NBA team. But what I think he can be is a secondary playmaker, a secondary initiator, but also at the combine really showcased a lot of his functional scoring capabilities as someone who operated as a cutter, someone who took advantage of playing off the catch, got to the rim on baseline drives, and also did a good job pushing in transition. Having just more guys with real playmaking feel is beneficial for any team in the league, and I think Utah specifically gets it here with Nikola Jurisic, who at times can be a little erratic and a little spontaneous with his pick and roll play and his creativity as a passer, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But Utah gets a big upside swing here on a bigger guard who, if he continues to grow as a ball handler, decision maker, and a jump shooter, all of a sudden you're looking at an awesome pickup here for Utah. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's also a lot of traits to work with. So it's very exciting, and the Jazz player development staff is going to have their hands full, but a lot of fun working with Jurisic going into next year if they took him 29th overall. Pick number 30, the Boston Celtics, the smartest team in the league, the team that coming into the year I picked to win the NBA Finals. They are one win away from making the finals at the time I record this. Very likely we could see them win it all this year. Jason Tatum could be on the cusp of getting his first ring. You never know. Luka Doncic might stand in his way. But Boston, 30th overall. The rich get richer. They're going to add some talent here. On draft night, I really think they're going to trade this pick out of the first round to a couple of second-round picks. But 30th, I think Boston here would select forward Baylor Shireman out of Creighton, one of my favorite players in this year's class because of his overall feel for the game and shot-making capability. This is a penultimate role player. This is the type of guy that you want on your roster to fit around star talent. And the Celtics have a really deep collection of star talent. They've got like 3 all-star level players, 2 other star-type players in Derek White and Drew Holiday. They've got a very fantastic roster, and Baylor Shireman would be a perfect fit because he can play make off of a live dribble, he can handle in the pick and roll a bit, he can create offense out of transition opportunities. He's just smart with the ball in his hands, actually ranked in the 100th percentile as a pick and roll ball handler this past year for the Blue Jays. And then also, what does he do well? He shoots, and he shoots with a lot of deep range. Adjusting to the NBA three-point line is not going to be a challenge for him. He actually, I believe, led the entire nation in 25-foot plus threes this past year at Creighton. So he's accustomed to taking deep three-point attempts. I think he's going to walk into the NBA and be very comfortable with the NBA three-point line. My running comparison for him has been Joe Ingles, who had a very fantastic career, still playing in the NBA right now. And Shireman, I think, is going to have very similar trajectory to becoming a good player. Someone who, for Utah, a lot of the time in the past, Ingles was their secondary playmaker, would run pick and rolls with Rudy Gobert. I think for Boston, if you get Shireman, he could work with Porzingis in the pick and pop game relatively well. He could just give you a really dynamic extra ball handler, guy to come off the bench and give the ball to, which is why I love him here, 30th overall for Boston at this spot. Thank you all so much for watching. Really do appreciate you guys. Make sure to go give us a follow on Twitter, as well as join that Discord I talked about earlier. Links in the description for both Twitter and Discord. Go click those links. Go join the Discord. Go follow us on Twitter. Really appreciate you guys. And then also, Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more. I had a lot of fun recording this mock draft. A lot of work goes into it, a lot of time, obviously, as you guys can see, but I really hope you do appreciate it. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.